Hello, nerds! Nerds for Yang. I wanted to do a quick reaction to AOC's discussion of the Freedom Dividend and UBI. I know a lot of people on Twitter have been talking about it, so I figured, what's all this talk about? Let's just go look at her video. And I haven't watched it at all, except for the first 5 or 10 seconds when I was looking for the video that everybody's referring to. Let's see what AOC says. And I'll just pause and react, and we'll go from there. By the way, if you have not subscribed to this channel, all I do is talk about every week stuff related to the presidential campaign, specifically, usually stuff around Andrew Yang.
And I thank you for presenting in a way that actually opens the discussion, because as you kind of alluded to, is that when it comes to universal basic income, there's more than one way to go about it. And one of the ways that we have seen presented most popularly this year, I think it's very regressive. Because the way that universal, that some of the more popular
Now, right off the bat, I think she's talking about the Yang proposal. She is going out of her way not to mention Andrew, which is fine, because I think she's here probably talking to her constituents. She's not here to be a pundit. And obviously she's a big endorser of Bernie's. But, you know, at some point, if you keep dancing around it, you might as well just say the guy's name. But that's fine. Let's keep going.
Popular UBI proposals is actually acting like a Trojan horse.
Interesting thing here about the air quotes and sort of the body language. She's definitely not a big believer in UBI so far. Of course, now she just used the term Trojan horse, which is generally not a positive term, but let's see what her argument is.
Where what they say is, we'll give you $1,000 a month, but we'll do it at the cost of gutting the entire public goods system.
Okay, so right there, I think she's referring to the Freedom Dividend being an option and something you opt into. I think using the term, we'll do it at the cost of gutting the entire, what was the word she used? Let's see. Let's go back.
What they say is, we'll give you $1,000 a month, but we'll do it at the cost of gutting the entire public goods system.
Okay, we'll do it at the cost of gutting the entire public goods system. That is not actually the proposal. The proposal is that anybody who receives direct government cash-like aid can continue receiving it as the program has always been, or they can just get their Freedom Dividend instead. Now, I suppose you could argue if a lot of people elect to take the cash, then less people are using similar cash-like government programs, and then those programs would be smaller. But ultimately, you know, that's like the people making the choice. So I don't know if that's the politicians or the program gutting the system. It's basically the people choosing to go a different way. But let's see what else she says.
So they'll say, you get $1,000 a month, but we're going to get rid of DBT, we're going to get rid of WIG, we're going to get rid of Pell Grants, we're going to get rid of like all of these other provisions. I
don't remember anything about getting rid of Pell Grants. That's a student loan program. But even just the language, we're going to get rid of, I feel is very demonizing of UBI. I think the way I would frame it is you can get the Freedom Dividend, or you can continue using other programs that provide you similar benefits, and you decide what's best for you. I don't think it's the same as we're going to get rid of. I think it's you choose. Which one do you want? And, you know, as a country of freedom where choice is valued, I can't see why this would be so terrible. I think ultimately it comes down to, if you believe large federal government programs are generally the answer to most problems, then yes, the idea of citizens electing not to use those programs and instead taking cash dividends, then yeah, it would be threatening. But I guess that then you have to decide, do you think large, complex government programs are generally the answer? And I think Yang would probably say, well, in some cases, like for infrastructure, they are. But in other cases, like in poverty reduction or job training, these are areas where maybe people should have a choice. And maybe the most efficient thing is to get cash, because as it's like the difference between, it's a holiday season, getting a bunch of gifts or getting the cash value of those gifts, which would kind of drive the most value for you. I mean, I know sometimes I've received gifts that they're made in good spirit. Of course, they're gifts, but they're like, oh yeah, a turtleneck. And it's like, wow, man, that turtleneck probably costs $100, maybe 150. I don't know. I could have spent that money on like a new microphone or a webcam for Nerds for Yang. So at any rate, I think this is really what we're getting at here, which is AOC does not believe that people should be given cash to solve their own problems. And she believes that large government programs are really the prime way. And anything that takes away resources from those programs, she would probably describe as gutting, as we've heard.
That created a substantial safety net for $1,000 a month, which is $12,000 a year, which is not enough. And so, so I think that's one of the bad ways of going about the question of UBI, is like, we'll introduce UBI at the cost of every other system that we've worked so hard to establish.
Again, it's not at the cost of every other system that we've worked so hard to establish. It is potentially at the cost of other systems where people feel like it's not giving them as much help as they need. I think the other misconception is that UBI and the Freedom Dividend is a replacement for all work and all government programs. And I would think of it more as a strong foundational source of seed capital to complement your job or whatever government programs you are benefiting from, if they're not direct cash-like programs. But I think this is an interesting juxtaposition within the Democratic Party. I would also notice that she usually comes across super confident and a master of the facts and argument. And you could tell she's struggling here. Like, she's not quite sure how to handle this. Maybe she's worried about offending people who are supporting UBI, or maybe she hasn't thought about it as much as maybe she has the Green New Deal or things like that, that obviously she's been very passionate about.
And then you basically use it as a Trojan horse to gut our entire social safety net.
Yeah, this whole Trojan horse thing, I mean, at some point it becomes a question of challenging people's motives. So I suppose if your argument is, wow, Andrew Yang is secretly trying to gut all government social programs, then yeah, you could make that argument that it's a Trojan horse. I would be curious, like, what evidence she has. I mean, this is a guy who started a national nonprofit to help more businesses get started in cities that are often overlooked by, major sources of capital. This is a guy who's running for president when he doesn't have to, when he could live a very comfortable life after his successful entrepreneurial career. And now we're saying he's somehow secretly trying to undermine all of government. It seems like a stretch to me.
For what, right? For a grand amount. So that's, I think, one of the regressive ways of going about it. But there are, I think, legitimate progressive ways of going about.
Now, wait a minute. If you use the term regressive, it generally means that the lower income people are more harmed by a policy. And UBI on its own is one of the most progressive, because everybody gets 12 grand a month. And obviously that 12 grand a month means a lot more to someone with low income than someone that's making $1 million a month. So by definition, it's progressive. Now, in fairness to AOC, maybe she's thinking about the value added tax being relatively regressive because the impact on lower income people as a percent of their income would be higher than very wealthy people. I think the nuance with Yang 2020 is that you kind of have to take the VAT and the UBI together, which generally will make it not regressive and still continues to be progressive in many cases. But yeah, I think that's one of those things where now you're throwing out terms like Trojan horse and regressive, which I think are almost like the equivalent of progressive dog whistles to just get people to be against something without really, in my opinion, looking at the facts. And the facts are, I think a lot of people on the lower end of the income scale would benefit from $12,000 a year. And I think a lot of people would prefer that over other forms of government support. And those other forms of government support probably are very expensive to run and manage and complex. And so less of the money actually goes to the people that need it and more goes to kind of like the system. So let's see what else she has to say. But so far, I'm already a little disappointed in the way she's framing it. But again, I acknowledge like, hey, not everybody loves UBI.
About the question of universal basic income, I've engaged a lot of economic experts about this. There is a mayor out in Michael Tubbs out in California who's running a pilot program of UBI. There are other ways that have gone about it, which is almost through a reverse, almost like and I think Rashida Tlaib has been going about this with her Boost Act, where it's like a reverse like a EITC that's so large that it gets people more money in their pocket. So I think when it comes to, I'm not opposed to discussions of UBI, and then also sometimes.
So I think what she's saying is she would be okay with UBI if it didn't come as an alternative to other government programs. I think she would, if I were to guess, I think she's okay with UBI if it were on top of every other government support program available. And I could see why, if you want to optimize for benefit to lower income people, well, yeah, if it were just not even a choice and you just get whatever you're getting today, and then on top of that, you get a $12,000 a year. I mean, I could see why she would think that would be beneficial. I think the trade-off there is like, hey, we got to get this passed. We got to get this through Congress. We got to get Republicans and independents to support this. And already with the Freedom Dividend as it's currently designed, it's encountering some headwinds because people are like, well, I don't think it's a fair giveaway. So if you said to people, well, it's going to be $1,000 a month on top of everything the government's already giving you, I could see a lot of independents and fiscal conservatives saying, hey, I don't think the numbers will line up. And frankly, they probably wouldn't, because the VAT alone won't pay for it. You have to have some savings from less resources going to some government programs that the people are going to choose to bypass instead of in order to access the Freedom Dividend. Or if you want to fund it completely with the VAT and have it stack on everything else, then it's not going to be $12,000 a year. It'll probably be more like $2,000 or $3,000 a year, I would imagine. And that would have probably less impact on those very same people that we're trying to be helpful to. I have to say, I think there's probably a way we can get AOC on board. Maybe if she spent some time face to face with Andrew or some of her staff, looked into it more. Maybe there's a way we can just agree, hey, look, your concerns are you don't want everyone to, you don't want to lose crucial programs like WIC. You are worried that if everybody takes advantage of this, then we're going to gut all these programs. Okay. So would it be reasonable to think about what percent of people would need to choose the Freedom Dividend over some cash-like programs for those programs to not be large enough to run? And I guess the second question is, if people did choose it, why? Why are they choosing cash benefits? Now, is it because they feel like they're getting more value, or is it maybe you're concerned that they're going to misuse the funds, and that's a conversation we should have. Because if it's the latter, then it becomes a philosophical debate about, how much do we trust citizens with countries' resources? And I would say we should err on the side of letting people choose, at least for the initial rollout. If, of course, you find that everybody's, using the funds in ways that are not productive, then okay, let's talk about that. But a lot of times, like big government programs or big policy changes, there's all these fears. I remember when I lived in Washington State, there was all these concerns about legalizing marijuana, and everybody was like, oh, people are just going to start crashing their cars left and right. And, it hasn't really happened. And then there was also with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, people were like, oh, all healthcare system will come crashing down. And, it didn't really happen. So I'm not sure if introducing UBI will result in everybody, running to the casinos. On the other hand, let's see, and let's kind of have a reasonable conversation and avoid, if possible, just sort of declaring something a Trojan horse and a secret effort to gut all of this America's safety net, because I feel like that's a little bit overreaching.
People think universal basic income is somehow a replacement or in competition to policies like a federal jobs guarantee, and I don't see it that way either. I think that they can work together, that they can be like puzzle pieces to meet different issues.
Okay, so with the federal jobs guarantee, I think that's like a classic contrast in that if you assume that the government will provide jobs to anyone who wants one, I would believe that that's probably one of the most inefficient things that you could do. I mean, the government does many things, some things well, coming up with jobs that are productive, satisfying, and drive a lot of value for the economy, like unclear. The largest probably government programs probably are military and then federal employees. And you could argue, well, is every dollar spent efficiently in those instances? Unlikely. Not because they're bad people. Of course, in some ways, they're some of the most patriotic, well-meaning people you can find. But those are just huge organizations without competition and without a market to force out an efficiency. So you kind of can't have it both ways. The other thing is if you have federal jobs guarantee and UBI, like a UBI loan is hard enough to pay for. To do both, this is sort of the fiscal conservative in me, which is like, hey, we have to, at the end of the day, have a budget that will balance over time at least. And I just can't see that cost of UBI plus the federal jobs guarantee plus a Green New Deal being paid for even with any long-term savings. I do think at some point you have to make choices.
I think at the end of the day, our country with the Green New Deal is about putting our country to work. But not everybody can work. Maybe you are disabled, maybe you're a caretaker, or maybe maybe you have some other arena of your life, or maybe a UBI would make sense. So I think for us, it's more of a weeds question. How do we go about this in a way that preserves and advances principles of justice? So with that, I think it's something that we should definitely consider. In fact, Richard Nixon was talking about a universal basic income. It's amazing to think, we have to look at what Republicans fought for 50 years ago. They would be like the radical leftist Democrats today. And that's how I feel now. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm a radical leftist because I believe that we should preserve our planet and that means that healthcare.
Okay, so that was the end of her answer about UBI. I think the way she closed it out saying, hey, even Republicans were in favor of this and Nixon was in favor of this is interesting. And I think it goes to show, I guess the question is, okay, well, if it could probably have some support within Republicans and independents, and it would provide unprecedented benefit to a lot of lower income people, or you think it might, let's say. But third, there would be a choice that no one would be forced to take it. Then I guess the question is what's the problem? Why is it that these current government programs that are an attempt on kind of a war on poverty, if they're not working as well as they could, and those impoverished want to try something else that the country wants to pilot, why not go for it? And why are we so sure that a federal jobs guarantee is so much better? I mean, I guess that's the other thing. And how are we so sure that these other government programs are really working? So ultimately, I think it comes down to we all want the same outcome. There's probably a philosophical difference about how resources should be allocated and the efficiency of large, complex government programs. But maybe the way to kind of find a win-win here is we say to AOC, like, hey, let's do some pilots. Let's do it in some meaningful scale. And let's protect those core programs that we all agree are, fundamental to the safety net. But also let's respect people's choice. So those are my thoughts on the AOC commentary on the UBI. Hope it was useful and interesting. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think maybe we're being too hard on AOC? And more importantly, do you think there's a way that we can get her on board? Because at the end of the day, we need everybody's support to get this thing through. And if you've got super conservative people saying it's terrible, and then you've got super progressive people saying it's terrible, in a way, that tells me that you're onto something. But at the same time, you got to pass it. And the extremes of both parties are really driving a lot of the conversation these days. So let me know what you guys think. Hope it was helpful. In the meantime, keep it real. Goodbye, nerds.